First of all, I want to say a massive thank you for asking me, and also to the Alpine Garden Society. As Raz said, I don't think I would be here if it wasn't for the Alpine Garden Society. It was a student bursary grant in 2018 that enabled me to go on Raz's absolutely amazing trip to the Peloponnese, looking for autumn flowering bulbs, and it completely blew my mind. And it was a particularly excellent year, I now know. So we were very lucky, but well, it certainly lit a fire in me, and I've been passionately going out throughout Greece ever since, looking for plants in the wild and to see these extraordinary sights. And yes, I'm unapologetic in the fact that this is rather a whimsical presentation, so I hope you'll bear with me. But I found it very, very difficult to reduce the number of sites and places to something sort of manageable. So I thought, how about show you some sites that are on famous mythological places around Greece. I think there is something about this truly amazing country that, for some reason, the huge weather systems, the incredible drama of the landscape, you sort of, when you're in Greece, you understand how Greek mythology happened. And every time I go out and I see these extraordinary sites, it gets me incredibly excited. And this first image here is actually of Crete, of Tulipa dorfleri, photographed at the end of April. It is very close to my first experience of Greek plants and sort of the Mediterranean geophyte, which was gardening at Sissinghurst. And Vita Sackville-West's husband, Harold Nicholson, was completely inspired by what he saw of, the spring carpets of flowers in Greece. And he created an area of the garden called Lime Walk, which is devoted to incredible geophytes. And it does its sort of huge explosion in the spring and then goes quiet for most of the rest of the year. But it was something that really sort of fired my imagination. So when I finally got to see what he was trying to replicate, I couldn't believe how much more beautiful it was in the wild. So this is the center of the universe, if you are an ancient Greek. This is Delphi on Mountain Parnassos, one of the most extraordinary and important ancient sites. The Greeks believed that the omphalos, the navel of the world, was here on the mountain, and the great sanctuary of Apollo was also part of it. And in the front here, you see this very, very beautiful Pisum sativum, which winds its way through these ancient ruins and Doric column sections, and you name it. It couldn't be more picturesque. And Asphodeline lutea and Alcana orientalis, all these incredible plants that are just hanging out in amongst this incredible beauty. So this diagram completely blew my mind when I first saw it. Greece is only just bigger than England, smaller than the UK. With a population of 10.3 million, 2/3 of which are in cities. It gives you a sense of quite how sparsely populated the rest of the country is, and why you get these extraordinary displays of flowers. There isn't so much development. Ben Nevis, tallest peak in the UK, is smaller than Parnitha, which is one of the great mountains that surrounds Athens. The tallest mountain, which I'm actually not going to focus on the north of Greece at all, I'm going to focus on the south because that's my range at the moment. But the tallest mountain, Mount Olympus, is nearly 3,000 meters, a truly amazing place. Approximately 5,800 native plants here versus 1,600 in the UK, and 1,000 endemic species. The Mediterranean climate obviously causes this great sort of diversity. To me, is just endlessly fascinating that you have around 40 endemic species in the UK. The longest coastline in Europe and 6,000 islands. 80% of Greece is mountainous. And there are over 4,000, I think it's 4,100 and something named mountains. So it really is an astonishing country. And my love affair with it feels like it's only just beginning. I've been living here for 3 years now, 3.5 years. And every time I go out into the wild, I'm constantly fascinated, inspired. I can't get enough, basically. So 19 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and we'll cover a few of them in this presentation. But this is the mythological map of Greece with all the sort of main locations for the ancient myths. And what I thought I would do is to focus on 5 important sites that I've visited and that have connections with Greek. There were originally 7, and I realized that my talk was going to take me about 3 hours. So this is a whistle-stop tour to give you a sense of quite how extraordinary these places are. And as a result, I hope it'll be like a taster rather than a frustration at not getting deep enough. They are some of my favorite places in Greece, and I just really wanted to share them with you. I'm laughed at often for photographing agricultural weeds, but this one of those locations that really gave me goosebumps. This is in the Peloponnese by Lake Stymphalia. It was when I was listening to Stephen Fry talking about the Herculean labours on Mythos, and he talked about Hercules getting rid of the Stymphalian birds. And I could picture myself in this field with the mist rolling in from the lake, and somehow everything comes together in this way that it feels incredibly special and exciting. The myths somehow are brought to life through the landscape and interaction with it. This is Iris attica growing on the side of Mount Kytherones. This was a series of clumps along the roadside that we found as we were going up the mountain, and I couldn't help but stop and photograph them. They were all different shades of purple and sort of a browny burgundy colour, and they were breathtaking against the yellow. And what you can see in the background, which makes it feel like it's quite high altitude when it really isn't. This is a landscape that's been burnt recently. All of this mountainside was burnt in 2021. And very excitingly, already you can see the wealth of geophytes coming back. Orchids that weren't flowering before are there. There's carpets of Veronica glauca, and the Anemone coronaria and Anemone nemorosa, just truly astonishing. But Kytherones was an interesting place because it is where Oedipus was left exposed by his mother and father to die, and also where Actaeon was torn to pieces. This is Adonis kallinii, one of my favourite endemics from very limited locations in the Peloponnese. This is an astonishingly beautiful plant. The way it sites itself across the mountains is, well, it's sort of beyond words. It likes these sort of sinkholes, these dolines, limestone sinkholes, and you find the Adonis in pools. So you get these extraordinary sort of yellow swimming pools of Adonis kallinii. And it's one of those great sites that I will never forget. And this beautiful plant, called Adonis after one of the most handsome men in the world, who was the lover of both Aphrodite and Persephone, and kallinii after one of the mountains where it's located in the Peloponnese, which is the mountain where Hermes was born. This is Lesvos. Again, I hope you'll indulge me, but when I saw this, the asphodels and the cows coming towards, you understand why there was the largest area of the underworld, the asphodel meadows, where the ordinary mortals were sent. And this image just made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. And it was sited very close by to an interesting Roman ancient burial space where you had these extraordinary tombs cut out of the rock on the beach. So you have this fascinating absence looking out across the sea in Lesvos, and these asphodels, truly, truly extraordinary sights. Well, these are my 2 favourite plant hunting companions. On the far left and on the far right is the Greek plantsman Lefteris thariotis, and I've been so fortunate to share so much of my Greek odysseys with him. He is insanely knowledgeable and truly inspirational, really. His knowledge of Greece and its flora is second to none, really. And he's constantly looking for interesting plants that could become ornamental plants. So we have a huge amount of fun looking at plants in the wild and appraising them and thinking how garden worthy they are. And it's enormous fun. And this sense of discovery with Lefteris and also with Mate, Laszlo Mate Talas, who's a Hungarian botanist and gardener who's in the middle. The 3 of us have a huge amount of fun together. That is Lefteris enjoying a cushion of Pterocephalus perennis on Mount Parnassus. And here we are. So Parnassus, or Parnassus, is one of the great mountains. It always fills me with awe, really. It was the home of the Muses, the home of Pegasus, a mountain of huge importance to Dionysus and Apollo as well. And it was here on Parnassus that Orpheus first was taught to play the lyre by Apollo. And you have here this very beautiful copper foliage looking out across the mountain. And this is the endemic peony, Peonia parnassica. This photograph was taken in early May, just as the foliage was coming up, and there were a few buds, and I just couldn't not come back. So I made a trip 2 weeks later to see them in full flower. They are probably one of my desert island plants. The depth of colour, some of these are almost black, sort of ox blood red. And when the light hits them, they're illuminated in a way. You can see in the photo on the right how the peony that are sort of lining the back of that limestone escarpment, they are almost black in colour. And then you've got this incredible illuminated red. The way that they grow in this place is astonishing to me. It's dotted through with Achillea grandifolia, and they're almost epiphytic in the way that they're growing into the rock. And I climbed up, probably stupidly, seeing as I was on my own, to the top of this escarpment. It's very sort of porous, and you've got huge chunks that are hollow in this big outcrop. And in these indentations, you have peonies growing all the way through these sort of channels. And it was incredibly exciting to see, really. Some of the peonies were given soil to grow in by decomposing Abies cephalonica, the native fir that grows all around this area. This is the wonderful campanula that grows. It's an endemic to Parnassus. Toppaliana subspecies delphica is so beautiful the way it stretches out across these vertical limestone cliffs. And it's sort of like a shot of electric blue in amongst the sort of greys and yellows, and it's stunning. I love frits. They're one of my favourite genera, and Fritillaria mutabilis grows on the slopes of Parnassus. This is slightly misleading because if you imagine the frits are above the crocus, so that area of sort of rock that you can see above the snow melt is where all these fritillaria are, and they are everywhere on the hillside. It is really very, very, very beautiful. There's quite a lot of diversity in, a bit like Fritillaria greca. You have some that have very, very dominant sort of yellowy green stripes on them with this glorious checkerboard on the inside. And then, of course, the snowmelt crocuses that light up. And this is the Temple of Apollo. So this is the great Doric temple and one of the most important sites of the Hellenic world. At spring, this was taken in early April. There's so many Ophrys sprunerii, and you've got the Asphodelian lutea, tons of different vetches. The pink that you can see in that photo is Silene colorata. Ferula communis, and the white sort of flat forms you can see are Tordillium apulum, which is a really beautiful thing, sort of lacy caps all over the hillside. On to Mount Helmos. This is the other side of the Bay of Corinth from Parnassus. It's one of my favourite mountains in Greece. It is not as high as Parnassus, but it still feels pretty impressive when you're here. The reason it's so interesting from a mythological standpoint is that the Styx Valley runs along the base of it. So the river Styx, where Thetis dipped Achilles into the water to make him immortal, but missed his heel, oops, where mortals would be ferried to the underworld. So you have this incredible connection with mythology. And I love all these fraxinus that you have all over the hillside. This is on some of the Alpine plains. You've got Tulipa australis all the way across just before you get onto the high peaks and where the ski slopes are. Viola aetiolica, which is a Greek endemic named after Mount Aeti in central Greece, where Hercules had his funeral pyre. And this asperula is a really stunning chasmophyte that is a local endemic, and you find it hanging off vertical cliff faces, and it's just so pretty, particularly against the red earth. This is all over one side of the slopes of Helmos, and and it is gorgeous. I would love to see this in cultivation. Amelanchier parviflora subspecies Helmia. It's got this very dainty foliage and very, very beautiful white sprays of flowers. And underneath it, unfortunately, I don't have a photo of it, but there's carpets of pink Orchis quadripunctata. Helmos in July. This is Lefteris photographing the plants overlooking, so that the dip that you can't see is the Styx Valley, and that's where the River Styx is. What I find very exciting about plant hunting in Greece is when we started off the day at the bottom of Helmos, the temperature was 40 degrees. And by the time we got up to this elevation, we were at 18 degrees. It's almost like by going up the mountain, you can rewind time and you can regain spring. I find that endlessly exciting because it means depending on how far you're prepared to travel and how high you're prepared to climb, there's always something exciting to see in Greece. These beautiful Digitalis ferruginea growing here with eryngiums and Pitylostum and Afer and different verbascums and Marina persica. It's just a really stunning garden. And you can imagine that as a dry garden slope in someone's stunning garden. I think it's an amazing combination of things. And the combination of that overlooking the River Styx. And this is down in the valley. This is what you find in the shady coniferous woodlands where the Styx flows. One of my favorite cyclamen, Cyclamen rhodium subspecies Peloponnesiacum. They are luminous in the semi-shade of these pine forests. What you can see too, I don't think I'm being too fanciful, is that they're dusted with gold, the leaves from the pollen of the pines. So you have these luminous flowers and gold dusted leaves, and it's just one of the best things. This is a little bit of a detour because I wanted to show you this amazing rock garden quite a long way southeast of where we've been in the Peloponnese. This is the monastery of Elona, and it's basically carved out of one of the faces of, or one of the sides of Mount Parnon. It's hugely vertiginous. There are some really interesting plants growing through here, like Petrorrhagia grandiflora and Campanula, Asperuloides, and the Tefcrium francisci vierneri. Greece often reduces me to tears, but this was one of those moments. The sort of sense of human interaction with nature and these extraordinary chasmophytic plants, just amazing. And this was even, I mean, the campanula, as you can see from the photo, was the flowers were actually going over. So when they're in full flower, it's this incredible crevice of blue flowers, but I think they're almost equally beautiful as sort of drying up. So moving swiftly on, so we're now in the Cycladics and Seriphos. It is where the Cyclops lived. And so Odysseus came to Seriphos to kill the Cyclops. And it's also where Perseus spent much of his childhood. And this photo is taken from the castle at the top of the Hora. All over this rocky outcrop at the top of the island are these wonderful chasmophytes. So you've got on the right, Dianthus fruticosa subspecies fruticosus. And then on the left, you have a really lovely endemic Silene called Cythnia. This is the sort of landscape you see around Seriphos. This is another one of those sites that reduced me to tears when I first saw it. This was taken in late May when the Euphorbia dendroides are taking on their summer colour. So you have basically the equivalent of trees taking on their autumn colour for the winter. As most of you will know, in the Mediterranean, our winter is really the summer. So the Euphorbia dendroides here take on summer colour, all these incredible, rich autumnal colours before losing their leaves and going into summer dormancy. What's extraordinary is that this whole space is actually a former mine. So it's called Megali Livadi. It was a huge bringer of wealth to the island. And well, since ancient times, Seriphos has been mined for its ores, iron ore in particular, from, I think it's sort of independence. The mines made the island very wealthy. This mine was run by a German company, but the mining conditions were terrible. So in 1919, there was a huge resistance of the miners to the conditions. They wanted 8-hour working days, they wanted rights. It turned violent and several of the miners lost their lives. And this area is now a sort of monument to their memory. And so you have these old mining buckets and the loading bridges that have just been left. It's some of the most pristine, beautiful Frigana I've seen. You've got all these interesting plants. The Humananema graeca is an interesting cycladic endemic in the Asteraceae. And this on the right is, to me, very interesting because this is Helichrysum italicum subspecies italicum. So what is it that we're all buying in the nursery trade as Helichrysum italicum? Because it certainly isn't this. And if anyone knows at the end of the lecture, I would really be very interested. Is it a subspecies? Is it something different? Has it come into the trade and been mislabeled? So this is another view of the site, and you can see these extraordinary rusted girders and a wonderful mix of Bolotta acetabulosa and Centaurea spinosa, and we've got Anacamptis sancta all through this area, Fagnallon graeca, the Helichrysum I've just shown you, all the Euphorbia dendroides, lots of different times as well. It's just the most breathtaking garden, and these architectural forms, to me, you can't get better than this. And now moving on at breakneck speed to Samos, and this was the birthplace of the goddess Hera. It is the most eastern of the East Aegean islands, and it's only 1 mile from Turkey, so has quite a lot of Turkish flora on the island, which is very interesting. And the reason I came to Samos was as an assistant to Lefteris, who had been sent on a collecting mission for one of the universities. It was such an extraordinary trip. We were here for 3 days and we explored this mountain that I took the photo from is Calvuni, and we're at about 1,150 meters at the Profiti Ilias church, looking west to Mount Kirkis, which is the tallest peak on the island, which is just over 1,400 meters. The Atraphaxis billardieri, another moment where I had tears in my eyes, and Lefteris and I sat and watched for a very long time, sort of trying to soak it all in. I don't know if you can see the scope of these amazing mounds. They cover the whole of the hillside, and the smell was extraordinary. It's Peloponnese, a truly beautiful plant, something I will never forget. And this is also, this is more photos of all the sort of interesting endemics at the top of the mountain. So we've got Thymus samia, there was also Thymus supilius up there, Selene ervilii, and this is a really cool thing, particularly up here with this goat-pruned Quercus coccifera. Lots of Cedaritis, Sipilia, and what else do we have? There were so many goodies. We managed to collect Oreganum sapelium, which is very, very exciting to me because I think it's a wonderful ornamental plant. And this is actually the photograph taken on the right is actually of plants that I now have growing in the nursery at Sparoza, the garden I work at. Helichrysum orientale growing so beautifully all over these lichened rock faces. This actually, we've now moved all the way across the island and are on Mount Kirkis. This was our destination. This is Mount Kirkis at around 700, 800 meters. The reason we were here was to hunt for Consolida samia, which is a teeny tiny little Consolida, which grows in the scree at around 800 meters on Mount Kirkis. And that's it on the island. And no one had seen it since the 1960s. So we were trying to find proof that it still existed. And I'm delighted to say that someone found it last year. There are now photos. There's a very, very good Facebook group actually called The Flora of Samos, and it's well worth joining if you're interested. There's some very, very knowledgeable local botanists that are always posting beautiful things. Here we go, climbing further up, more Atraphaxis, but I just love it amongst this sort of pink mounds in amongst the scree, just absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. And here we've got Paracarium auscheri, which is, I think this is the westernmost range of it. You find it in Turkey, and it was extraordinary to see it. It's teeny tiny, and the only reason we found it was that Lefteris needed a fag break, and we sat down and there it was in amongst the junipers and the Euphorbia rigida. So after we'd climbed Kirkis and Carvuni, the next reason we were here was to look for Greece's rarest orchid, which was such a privilege to see. It's Dactylorhiza pythagorae. It's only found in Samos on this one streambed. That's it on the right. So really, really very shy looking in amongst the grasses, but a really healthy population. But like so many rare endemics in Greece, wonderful to see it thriving in its location with lots of numbers, but it makes you realize how vulnerable these plants are, because if anything happened to this location, or if fire ripped through it, or you wonder, would it, recuperate, would it regenerate? And here we go, our last destination, Crete. I didn't know how to couch Crete in sort of interesting terms, because it's so varied and so enormous. It's the largest island in Greece, and really it's its own country. It has enormous mountains. Mount Ida, which I absolutely love, is 2,500 meters and an astonishing place. Well, this is Prevoli. And this is so characteristic of Crete, because you have these enormous gorges. And what you have here is one of the unique features, which is Phoenix theophrasti, one of only 2 European palms. They are incredible things. I should have actually have used a photo with Mate in the foreground to give you a sense of the scale, because they are enormous and these gorges are huge. And you can see what is so characteristic of so much Cretan endemic flora are the chasmophytes, so hanging off these incredibly high gorges, and almost impossible to photograph or to see properly. I did wonder whether you could explore the gorges with a drone, but here we go. One of my favorite chasmophytes, the Cretan endemic Ebonus cretica. It's something we have in the garden here too, and unfortunately the photo doesn't really do it justice, because this is just as it's coming into flower, but it's a fabaceae, and these wonderful, fluffy, bright pink flower heads. It covers these vertical spaces with these extraordinary pink displays, and it's a wonder to behold. And Cyclamen creticum that you see all over Crete, and again, one of my favorite cyclamen, I think, along with Rhodium subspecies Peloponnesiacum. It is so elegant and small and understated, and this was photographed not far from the Omelos plateau going up to the Samaria gorge, and you have these beautiful carpets of Cyclamen creticum with Orchis pauciflora and also Orchis quadripuntata and the Daphnes, and it's just amazing. And this is the Omelos plateau. This is Tulipa bakeri. This was photographed in late April, and just a little bit too early for the carpets that you often see in the books on Crete. But I was still incredibly thrilled to see it. Yeah, one of these amazing natural sights, along with the tulip fields at Spili. And this Tulipa dorfleri, another of these very beautiful native tulips. Spili is a unique and very, very special place that is south of Rethymnon. Spili Bumps is a sort of alpine meadow. You have these incredible carpets of tulips mixed in with these anacamptis. So we've got boreae and laxiflora in here, I think. Particularly, this was taken as the sun was setting, and the light illuminating the flowers was astonishing. I divided the orchids in Spili Bumps into 2 different categories. So you have the non-ophrys, so you've got the anacampsis, boreae, laxiflora, the orchis, simia and italica, serapias. I love the serapias lingua, and of course the man orchid, Orchis anthropophora, and the pauciflora behind it, and Anacamptis collina. I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches as far as orchids are concerned, and you can't walk through it without treading on flowers. It's carpets encrusted with orchids, and these are the ophrys. So you've got Ariadne, of course, named after King Minos's daughter and Queen Pasiphae's daughter, Ariadne, the spinner. And Ophrys fusca, episcopalis, Scolopax subspecies Heldrakeae, Cretica cretensis, and Bombiliflora. I don't think they really do it justice, the photographs, but you can get a sense, I suppose, of how many there are. when you look back through the images. This is really to finish a very, very beautiful tree. It's a sub-Minoan olive, so over 3,000 years old, and it's in the Amari Valley, just down from the Minoan site, Monastiraki, which is one of the great Minoan palaces. And to me, to be able to interact with a plant that has been around since the Minoan times is mind-blowing. Me and my friend Miranda sitting in the olive, to give you a sense of scale, an incredible, incredible place. Yes. And this is just a few books, some of my favorite books, basically, on Greek flora. Helmut Baumann, if you haven't come across it, it's a really, really beautiful book about ancient history and plants and the interaction between plant lore and the origins of botany and all sorts of things. Flowers of Crete by John Fielding and Nicholas Turland, amazing. Field Guide of Bulbs of Greece by Kit Gray-Wilson. Flowers of Greece, indispensable, and it's just been republished, so you can get copies of it. And the Botanical Paradises, sorry, typo, of Greece. It is in Greek, but don't let that put you off. It is my Bible as far as exploring Greek mountains goes. And because all the plant names are in Latin, you can understand, you can navigate, and it gives each of the mountains, each of the areas, place by place, and all the different regional, so you get all the endemic flora, all the things of interest, and it's a wonderful book. And this is my Instagram, Lucie Willan, and also Sparoza Garden, which I run. So thank you so much.
Everyone, I would encourage you, if on Instagram, do follow Lucie and Sparoza. She has amazing pictures of Greece and the plants there. And talking about Sparoza, well, my first question is, can you tell us a little bit? I know there's a lot to say about the garden, but just sort of give us a flavor, how it was created, where it is. Because I often tell people you can easily have a weekend away in Athens and see so many species on the various mountains, but they could also come and visit the garden. So please tell us a few things about it.
Of course, Sparoza it's a really interesting garden. It's pretty much one of the only historic gardens in Greece, and it was founded in the mid-60s by a British woman. She was a British urban designer and urban planner called Jackie Tyrwhitt, and she created this amazing postmodernist house and garden on a totally unprepossessing site overlooking the Mesogeian plain. So we now have a sterling view of the airport, but it is very, very convenient too, because we're only half an hour from Athens, and if you're driving quickly, less than 10 minutes from the airport. And what Jackie was doing, she was completely ahead of her time, and she wanted to create a garden full of native plants and drought-tolerant species. So she collected Mediterranean climate zone plants from all over the world and set about creating a garden in the most unprepossessing site imaginable. There was almost nothing here, no trees, barely a wild olive. It was completely overgrazed, and she blew dynamite holes into the landscape in order to plant Pinus halepensis, Aleppo pines, a few stone pines as well, and some cypresses and a few other native trees. And what she did is the first 10 years were terrible, and she calls the garden the plant graveyard. But once the trees got high enough and there was enough of a windbreak to protect us from the north wind, she started to create an extraordinary oasis, basically. And she created something very important, and she left the garden to the Goulandris Natural History Museum, and they have still own it. And they found a series of eccentric tenants, British tenants, in order to keep the garden going. And the second of these tenants was an amazing woman called Sally Razelu. And Sally was the custodian of Sparoza for nearly 30 years. And she was the woman that I came out to work with in October 2020. And she founded the Mediterranean Garden Society in 1994 and became its first president. And the idea really was that if plants could thrive and grow at Sparoza, they would be sure to do better almost anywhere else. And so it was an experimental dry garden with Mediterranean climate zone plants from all over the world and a collection of as many native plants as possible to show people how they could garden ecologically and sustainably. And so, yes, Sally very sadly got sick almost as soon as I arrived, and we got locked down together. And I carried on looking after the garden and caring for her, and she died in March 2021. And I've stayed on to look after the garden ever since. But it's a very special place. And from December till April, it is a paradise. It's really a wild garden. And it's these sort of successive waves of native geophytes and annuals that make the display stunning. And then it's underpinned by Mediterranean climate zone shrubs and trees. And it's wonderful. So if you would like to come and visit me, please do. I should have put the website on the slide as well, which is sparozagarden.com, and you can book a tour of the garden with me there. But if you have any questions, drop me a line, and yeah, it would be lovely to talk to you.
So would you consider yourself a eccentric English tenant?
There's no doubt, Raz, I'm afraid. Last of a long line.